the seriousness of our situation. Few act responsibly, few are aware of the consequences of their actions. While some stubbornly proclaim that the assassination attempts on Trump were a hoax, that he is a fraud, a bad actor, one of them part of the problem, helping to damage him politically, World War III is in the making. In case you haven't noticed, Europeans are noticing it very much because suddenly there are refugees everywhere. Crime has risen, prices for everything have exploded, to name just a few effects, while the thoroughly corrupt political caste and media beat the war drum every day. If you are a U.S. citizen, you may not feel the consequences yet, except that 170 billion of your tax dollars have been sent to Ukraine to fund the senseless killing of people, including many civilians caught in the crossfire. How many homeless shelters, kindergartens, public parks, bridges, swimming pools, retirement homes could have been built or renovated with that money? Quite a lot. But funding a senseless blood mill that produces corpses and is on the verge of escalating into World War III seems to be your preference. I have no influence on how politicians spend taxpayers' money. But you do have an influence on what kind of information you introduce into the public debate. And whether you believe it or not, it has an influence on others, good or bad, and therefore an influence on the outcome of the political landscape. Darksiders know that small things can have a big impact. That's why they try to influence and manipulate every single thought and vote, and that's why they censor so panicky. What we're seeing in politics right now is a conflict between one politician, Trump, promising to literally end the war in Ukraine and prevent World War III with immediate effect, while the other candidate, Harris, promises to provide Ukraine with all the weapons needed to win. Which is impossible because Ukraine doesn't have the soldiers or resources to win a long-term war of attrition against Russia. This means that NATO will inevitably have to send troops, which will automatically lead to a third world war and millions of deaths. This is the real gravity of the situation.
I will prevent, and very easily, World War III, very easily. Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, I will have the disastrous war between Russia and Ukraine settled. It will be settled quickly. I will get the problem solved, and I will get it solved in rapid order, and it will take me no longer than one day. I know exactly what to say to each of them. I got along very well with them.
The Satanist infiltrators in the U.S. and European governments and media are trying very, very hard to escalate this conflict through micro-step manipulations. And every day they get a little closer to that goal. The most responsible thing you can do is to consider the analytical information in this video and reevaluate your position if you believe Trump to be a bad actor. These are not times of peace. There is a war going on, an information war that threatens to escalate into a hot war. The confusion is being deliberately created and supported by the enemy through information, cognitive, and psychological warfare. Many of the suspicious doubters who suspect the assassination attempts on Trump to be staged events lack a knowledge of history and basic statistics showing that assassination attempts on politicians in general, and on U.S. presidents in particular, are not extremely rare or even anomalous events, but occur with occasional probability. There have been 46 U.S. presidents as of 2024, and 4 of them were assassinated. Abraham Lincoln, 1865. James A. Garfield, 1881. William McKinley, 1901. John F. Kennedy, 1963. So approximately 8.7% of U.S. presidents have been assassinated. A 10% chance typically falls into the category of occasional. Classification of probabilities. Virtually impossible, approaching 0%, but not quite zero. Negligible, less than 0.001%, 1 in 100,000. Astronomically rare, less than 0.01%, 1 in 10,000. Extremely rare, less than 0.1%. Very rare, less than 1%. Rare, 1% to 5%. Occasional, 5% to 20%. Likely, 20% to 50%. Very likely, over 50%. There have been numerous assassination attempts on U.S. presidents, both successful and unsuccessful. Presidents who survived assassination attempts. Andrew Jackson, 1835, a man attempted to shoot Jackson with 2 pistols, both of which misfired. Theodore Roosevelt, 1912, shot in the chest while campaigning for a 3rd term as president after leaving office. He survived and even finished his speech with the bullet lodged in his body. Franklin D. Roosevelt, 1933, an assassination attempt shortly before his inauguration, the mayor of Chicago was killed instead. Harry S. Truman, 1950, Puerto Rican nationalist, tried to kill Truman at Blair House, his temporary residence. Richard Nixon, 1974, there was a plot to hijack a plane and crash it into the White House, but the plot failed. Gerald Ford, 1975, 2 assassination attempts occurred in California. Both failed, one by Lynette Squeaky Fromme, who pointed a gun but didn't fire, and another by Sarah Jane Moore, whose shot missed. Jimmy Carter, 1979, a man with a gun was arrested near Carter's rally. However, Ronald Reagan, 1981. Reagan was shot by John Hinckley Jr. outside of Washington, D.C. hotel. He survived despite serious injuries. George H.W. Bush, 1993. A plot to assassinate the former president during his visit to Kuwait was uncovered and foiled. Bill Clinton, 1996. A man attempted to shoot Clinton with a rifle from a rooftop, but missed. George W. Bush, 2001 and 2005. Bush was targeted multiple times, including an attempt by a grenade thrower in Georgia, the country, not the U.S. state, but it failed to detonate. Total. There have been at least 11 U.S. presidents who faced unsuccessful assassination attempts, and likely more, as we will never know about most of the attempts. So, alongside the 4 assassinated presidents, that brings the total number of U.S. presidents who experienced assassination attempts, both successful and unsuccessful, to 15. Percentage 46/15x 132.6%. Approximately 32.6% of U.S. presidents have faced assassination attempts. That is 1 out of 3.
They are reptilians. They are the most evil creatures that you could possibly imagine.
Und die haben das dann aufgegessen.
We're talking about children cut apart, fed to other children. Children being boiled alive in shit and piss.
What did they say about the devil, about Lucifer?
That killing the people made him happy.
Now bow down to your king.
They are the murderous, death-worshipping assassins who kill witnesses and political opponents. They are the lying, deceitful hoaxers who stage events to emotionally manipulate the public for political purposes. They are the ones who project their own thoughts, words, and actions onto others. Know you is their motto. They are the psychological warfare operatives who portray their actual attempted and failed assassinations as hoaxes. Because if they don't succeed in physically assassinating their target, they can at least portray their target as a hoaxer, as a fraud, as a bad actor, as one of them, as part of the problem in order to destroy his reputation. This is how they try to turn a defeat into a victory. They are ultimately behind discrediting the assassination attempts on Trump as inauthentic to damage Trump's reputation. There are also confused amateur investigators involved who have either lost themselves in the confusion of information overload, unfounded suspicion, and blind anger, or have been successfully influenced by the enemy's psychological warfare and mind control targeting them. Real versus staged events. Distinguishing between real events and staged events is not easy when the staged events have reached a certain level of sophistication. There is a saying in law, show me the man, I'll show you the lawsuit, which means that there is something to find about everyone, or if there is nothing to find, there are approaches to construct something out of nothing so that it looks like something. It is similar with events. Show me the event and I'll show you the oddities, the strange, the curious, the statistically improbable, the unbelievable. The intention determines the result. If someone wants to find something or something that appears to be something, if they want to create a certain image, they will succeed. In the short term at least, eventually all lies crumble when the truth puts enough pressure on them. Hoaxes are formulaic because those who perpetrate them rely on pre-formulated procedures to be efficient. Therefore, they have constant distinguishing features that do not change or change only slightly. The most important identifying feature is clues. These are clues that hoaxers must include in their hoaxes to make them recognizable as hoaxes, because metaphysical rules prohibit them from staging perfect hoaxes that are indistinguishable from real events. Some of these clues can be complex and require careful analysis or occult insight. Others, however, are quite obvious, at least intellectually obvious. They present the investigator with emotional challenges. The challenge, for example, is to accept the level of malice that most cannot tolerate judging by their own standards, which are not the standards of ruthless psychopathic hoaxers. In the case of the Sandy Hook hoax, the lack of tears is one such obvious identifying feature that unquestionably exposes the event as a hoax. 12 years have passed since the hoax, and dozens of parents, mothers, fathers, and siblings have not cried a single tear, not one. They pretend to cry, but they never really cry. Of course, you might see tears on videos and pictures, but there are none to be seen, because Sandy Hook was a hoax. Definitive evidence compared to rarity. The Sandy Hook hoax has dozens of elements that are not authentic and have logical flaws that expose it as a hoax. Some of them are more revealing than others. Most of these elements fall somewhere between rare and infrequent on the plausibility scale. This means that most of the elements by themselves do not prove that the event was a staged hoax. They need to be combined to provide evidence. The bad acting of the performers in the Sandy Hook mess, for example, is strong evidence, but only for very observant and critical people. It is not by itself proof, strange and outrageous to be sure, but not definitive. The only element that is definitive is the lack of tears. That dozens of mothers over a period of 12 years did not cry a single tear over their allegedly brutally murdered children is impossible. It cannot be explained by human nature. The missing tear factor is basically on par with physical laws or even mathematical principles in terms of reliability. It is definitive proof that it was a staged event. As for the assassination attempt on Trump, there are no clear elements. All the elements mentioned by suspicious individuals lie somewhere between often and very rarely at most on the probability scale. A strange, disturbing, suspicious event, suspicious in relation to the official version of one shooter, which is probably false. But there is no clear indication that it was a completely staged event. The basic hoax formula. Staged school shootings as an example. Incessant repetition on all channels. They've been whining about some of these hoaxes for over a decade now. Every day is school shooting day. Every day they remind people how supposedly emotional and tragic these staged events were. Maximum financial exploitation, crowdfunding for millions of dollars, lawsuits against gun manufacturers, $1 billion in damages for questioning the event. Maximum political exploitation, the great need for background checks, gun-free zones, confiscation of guns, total censorship on all major platforms. They can't allow their lies to be questioned. Compare that to the Trump assassination attempt. Total silence on all channels. Attempts to discredit it as a hoax are real, but harmless, no bullet, just shrapnel. Google didn't include it in search results, but tried to cover it up. They pretended it never happened. They still do. No exploitation. Trump rarely mentions it on his own, usually only when asked, and then only answers briefly and in simple form, and somewhat humorously. Being a politician can be dangerous. Golf may not be so healthy after all. Trump has never presented the assassination attempts on him as a reason for gun control. No censorship on any platform. Facebook and YouTube don't censor hoax theories about the assassination attempt, but censor anything that questions Sandy Hook. The basic media formula. The mainstream media is a propaganda machine largely controlled by the ABC agencies. Events reported by the media either A, have happened but are reported in a manipulative way. B, did not happen at all but are made up. C, happened but were staged events, hoaxes. The vast majority of media reports fall into category A. Mind you, they report 24/7 and 365 days. Most of their reports are lies about real events that happened somewhere sometime. They twist the facts in their political favor. Or they fail to mention relevant information, they lie by omission. They also invent events that never happened. False storytelling. Hoaxes make up the absolute minimum of their reports. Hoaxes are extremely rare compared to real events. There is not a Sandy Hook hoax every week, every month, or every year. So don't lose touch with reality. There is an organized Truman Show reality TV production in this world, but it takes place in parallel with real life, and real life is much bigger. Real events happen. Tragedies, dramas, accidents, and crimes happen. The newspapers and crime statistics are full of them. They happen to family, friends, neighbors, and ourselves. They also happen to those who are part of the system, politicians and media personnel, and so on. People have become so accustomed to being lied to and deceived by the media and politicians that their reaction to events has become knee-jerk, dismissing them as staged without doing the necessary research. They refer to mere hints and possible clues as indisputable evidence. They point to patterns that resemble symbols as an obvious assumption of responsibility. They base far-reaching conspiratorial conclusions on as little as typos. They claim small odds prove impossibility. All of this is absurd. It's unprofessional, unreasonable, and manic. Hoax investigations have turned into a hysteria that makes people lose touch with reality, which is encouraged by the enemy. They want to distract people from reality. They want us to be delusional and paranoid and unable to tell the true from the false and the right from the wrong. This makes it easy for them to operate in the resulting confusion. Investigations are often unfounded suspicions driven by blind rage at the system. Discernment, differentiation, and responsible action are no longer practiced. Perceiving every event as a hoax is an irrational, emotional defense mechanism that preemptively wards off potential fraud. If I don't think anything is real, I can no longer be deceived, they think. That's wrong, because there are real events that the hoax syndicate wants people to think are hoaxes because it's in their favor. As in the case of the Trump assassination, which was a real event, the hoax syndicate wants people to think it's a hoax. They are ruthlessly playing with people's sense of reality. It's a brutal psychological warfare that will eventually melt people's minds if they don't break out of the delusion.
Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I don't think in terms of winning and losing. I think in terms of getting it settled so we stop killing all these people. You have
Mr.
to
President,
get Europe.
can I just follow up on that, because that's a really important
Excuse me,
statement
let me
that
just
you just
follow
made
up.
there. Can you say if you want Ukraine or Russia to win this war?
I want everybody to stop dying. They're dying, Russians and Ukrainians. I want them to stop dying.